Hey everyone, welcome back to the DNS Podcast. In today's episode, we're diving into a rapidly evolving area in healthcare and nutrition: how to effectively use artificial intelligence and platforms like open evidence to support clinical decision making. As AI tools become more integrated into clinical practice, knowing how to ask the right questions or craft effective prompting is just as important as understanding the evidence itself. For dietitians, this presents an opportunity to enhance efficiency, strengthen evidence-based care, and stay at the forefront of innovation. Joining us is registered dietitian nutritionist Keiy Murofushi. Keiy is a master's prepared clinical nutrition leader, researcher, and healthcare executive with more than a decade of experience advancing nutrition practice across major academic medical centers and health systems. He currently serves as Vice President of Clinical Growth and Strategy at HHS LLC, where he leads strategic innovation across clinical nutrition programs. Prior to HHS, he held leadership roles overseeing clinical nutrition programs, food service operations, and multidisciplinary care teams at institutions including Johns Hopkins Health System, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, and Morrison Healthcare, with a focus on scalable care models that integrate clinical nutrition with quality improvement and population health. He is currently pursuing a doctorate in clinical nutrition at Rutgers University with scholarly interest in implementation science, continuity of nutrition care across healthcare and community settings, and the responsible integration of innovations such as artificial intelligence and digital health tools into clinical decision making.
Coming to you from the Dietitians and Nutrition Support Dietetic Practice Group, this is the DNS Member Podcast, where we explore topics relevant to our field. From support line content to nutrition celebrity interviews and everything in between, this podcast is where DNS members can go behind the scenes and explore the driving forces behind cutting-edge nutrition support. I'm your host, Christina Rollins. Let's get started.
Well, welcome to the DNS Podcast. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to chat with us today.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Christina.
So to start us off, how are you currently seeing AI tools being used by dietitians in both the clinical and the research setting?
Sure. So, AI, I don't want to make it too simplified because AI is kind of being used as a catch-all for a lot of different tools and resources out there for clinicians and practitioners throughout the nutrition field. But really, when we're talking about these specific segments, there's a lot of different heterogeneity in terms of how it's being utilized. So with clinicians, you have a lot of applications that are already interfacing with EHRs like UpToDate or even data analyzers like Tableau that have access to data and are being utilized by clinicians at the bedside. So you have things like UpToDate, which can provide really up-to-date clinical guidelines and really helping clinicians access the information they need to do their kind of bedside care. And, it's really great because some of these applications have already existed. They're just now really harnessing AI to make their tools much more useful for clinicians. I know I mentioned Tableau, but healthcare systems as a whole have been utilizing kind of data platforms for a very long time to analyze clinical data. But now that they are able to really utilize AI, some of these platforms are now able to crunch numbers much faster, not only for clinicians, but for leadership and managers. So even things like simple Microsoft Power BI, it's a very powerful dashboard platform, but they're now using AI to kind of help, clinical nutrition managers as well as clinicians really understand their numbers and their metrics a lot better and in real time. Similar things for researchers, we're finding that AI is being dealt with in a variety of different ways. Certainly a lot of administrative things, even for clinicians, the chat GPTs and and the Claude-based platforms. These are really great tools that can help simplify kind of day-to-day tasks. We're even finding clinicians doing things like updating education materials and really helping them with some of those small nuances that used to take us a long time to build, but now we can actually ask these platforms to do them much faster for us. And it goes for research as well. It can actually help build us visual abstracts and things to that effect that are much more tedious from an administrative standpoint, but it's making those things much faster. Another thing with both clinical and research is kind of like literature triaging. A lot of us, even in the clinical or research side, we're trying to come up with questions to answer when it comes to research or clinical performance improvement or quality improvement projects. And now that these AI platforms have access to evidence and access to PubMed, it's actually able to help us with understanding where the literature stands in present state and how can we generate new questions and answer new questions as we go into advancing our profession and our practice. There's definitely a lot of other things like qualitative aspects to it too, but really there's so many nuances to where how you can harness AI.
Well, and that's actually where the idea for this episode came from, was doing a systematic review. So looking through the literature and using AI, and just it's amazing how much faster you can sift through the data and get to the information that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it too complicated with the background information. I strongly encourage listeners to, really catch themselves up on the various models of AI. But now that we have such really well harnessed models that do natural language processing, they're able to read these articles very quickly. So you have programs like Elicit or Open Evidence, which now you can actually ask questions within the article and answer those questions. So rather than trying to find, oh, how many subjects were in there, you can just ask the chatbot how many subjects were in there, and it'll spit it out very quickly. So there's so much, there's a lot of power to this, but really it's about the use case and identifying what's ideal for you.
Mm-hmm. So, in your experience, how have you seen, or how can you, imagine in the future seeing dietitians using AI to access and interpret all of the scientific evidence out there, systematic reviews, and really just the practice guidelines that we're so in tune to using in our day to day?
Yeah, I definitely want to acknowledge that the rigor of doing really robust systematic reviews by research teams and academics are very important because at the end of the day, AI is only as good as it can be based on how it's trained and how it's modeled. And so we're still finding that in some cases it does hallucinate. It still does have some error in there. So you really have to vet the outputs, but they are able to do kind of simplified versions of systematic reviews. So really pulling information together. I previously mentioned Elicit, which is a AI tool that actually does kind of quick systematic reviews, and they can actually scope it for, doing 10 articles in their systematic review or only 50 articles, and they do it very quickly. So it's very helpful to kind of get your ideas out there, see if there's actual data to help justify some of those questions or help kind of take the next step of now I need to really focus my research around these subjects or these questions. But to your point, it is really unique in that we're able to kind of do soft systematic reviews. I'm going to call it soft because it's not a true one. Even before we get really deep into the rigor of doing a full systematic review with the research team and getting all of the data extracted from those articles.
So, what are your thoughts on tools like Open Evidence? I mean, they're so easy. It's an app, it's a desktop application too. So, what are your thoughts on clinicians using this tool or tools like it to get to that evidence-based medical information or research or just answering their day-to-day clinical questions?
Yeah, it's Open evidence is so great. It's able to access a lot of publications and really give you strong outputs. But part of this challenge is about how we're prompting our inquiries. So I think there's been a lot of discourse on social media and LinkedIn about what's proper prompting or how do we get prompting that's accurate. So it's very important that when we're really looking at these things, that the more effective prompting is around kind of specifying what you want as an output. So you may have to be very specific about what's the purpose of my question or my inquiry? What's the context? What's the task I'm asking? Or what are the constraints that we really want? There's also kind of like desired formats. Do you want to do a side-by-side comparison of current literature to current guidelines? So open evidence has the ability to pull what's the most recent ADA guideline for diabetes management, but it can also look at current literature. And so it can do the side by side, but you have to really effectively prompt the open evidence platform to do that. So one great thing that I actually saw Open Evidence publish a prompting guideline, and they really said if you give it a prompt like what's the best evidence or what's the current evidence, it will actually give you two very different answers. And so it's really important that when you do harness these kind of chatbot AI platforms, that you do also look at their resources to better understand what is the best way to prompt and how do I want to get the outputs that I want to do. Just because I think most of us clinicians are so used to doing journal clubs at our facilities. That was a really great way for us to kind of hear what's current articles that are out there, because as we know, the articles that come out are much faster than some of these larger systematic reviews or guidelines, which take a couple of years to produce. And so open evidence can kind of do that quick side by side now of showing, okay, here's the recent guideline, but also here's kind of the recent literature. Sorry, that was a very long-winded response for that question, but it's very important to get those out.
Yeah, and I think with the using the chat bots and these things, it'll ask you additional questions like, well, did you mean X, Y, or Z? But not always, right? Like sometimes it'll just give you the answer to your question without asking any other clarifying details.
Correct. Some of them are now programmed and it is kind of iterative, and it actually has kind of this agentic format where it is trying to generate things autonomously, but it will prompt you through that process, versus some it's become solely autonomous and it will not do those prompts of asking you further clarifying questions. So it is important that you choose the right platform and really understand how they're using that.
So are these platforms also advertising where their data is coming from, right? Because it's not just searching everything. It's searching based on what it's been fed and what it's learned to do. So how can we know that we're, like I know open evidence, it's like JAMA, New England Journal of Medicine. How do we know where it's coming from?
Absolutely. That's a very important question. So one of the things that you can do is ask the AI to generate, number one, the citations for you, and also some of the justifications for why they decided to produce those outputs for you. So as you're building your inquiry, you can also add layers for justifications so that you can cross-check and verify. That's one component. But the other thing is a lot of these programs now are trying to be a lot more transparent about where their data comes from. As you know, there's been a lot of court cases around proprietary information and copyright infringements with relation to like OpenAI and things of that nature. And so they are becoming a lot more transparent of what licenses do they have to access certain information and where are they getting it. So to your point, open evidence is using things like JAMA and the New England Journal of Medicine, and they're citing those on their sites as well.
So do some research on the app before you start feeding it your questions.
Oh yeah, as much as you can. And I always tell people, it's like, make sure you check your institution as well. We all work for large hospitals and many of them are academic or have large libraries at them. And they probably are already using an approved AI that you can use for some of their library searches and things to that effect. So really check in with your teams, check in with your institution. What are they using and what are some things that are pre-approved and already vetted? So maybe you don't need to do a lot of that background research on your own.
Well, and I would add to that too, check with your institution. They likely have a policy on the use of AI tools. And also, is it Is it HIPAA compliant? What kind of information are you feeding it that now you've lost control over? So super important to do that review as well.
Absolutely. And, as I mentioned, data science is not a new field. Data science is a very old field, and we've got a lot of experts in this area. So most likely your institutions have a lot of data scientists and people who have been in this space for some time. So really inviting them into your interdisciplinary team, especially if you want to start looking at your own research or your own clinical data and using AI, bring those stakeholders on your team because they're very critical for making sure that they're vetting the tools that you're using.
Well, I think one of the reasons why these tools are so popular is because they're so fast. They, like you said,
Mhm.
they produce it in seconds or minutes compared to years of research. So how do we balance that efficiency with accurate information and making sure that we are really getting good, reliable info?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, most people are kind of skipping that verification process, right? It's so fast and so easy that it's really taking a lot of that legwork out. And if anything, this is just like that call to action. It's a reminder, don't skip that step. We really need to do some verification work because that efficiency can sometimes create some minor hiccups along the way. It can misprint a number or misplace a terminology that we weren't intending to use. And so making sure we're doing that accuracy part and really as dietitians, we're not meant to be experts in the AI itself. We're meant to be experts in the content. And so really making sure that yes, this is helping us with efficiency, but the accuracy, to your point, is what we're the experts in. So making sure that we're cross-verifying the accuracy. Now, there are ways to help mitigate some of that. So I mentioned earlier, education materials might be one of those things that we might cut a corner around. It's okay to use AI for some of these things. And so it's really understanding, all right, the content is already in this format. I just want them to make it look better or make it look prettier. Those are really great ways to bring efficiency, but still maintaining the content. That way, you're not having them generate numbers and generate figures that weren't already a part of the materials that we were producing.
Mm-hmm. So, from your work with the Academy's Evidence Analysis Center, how can AI support or potentially complicate the process of evidence synthesis?
Yeah, I really, this is kind of the area that I often worry about is, are we going to be moving in a direction that is cutting corners for some of the scientific rigor? I think what's great is that this efficiency has really allowed us to scour data, scour evidence much faster. But as I mentioned in the previous questions, it's kind of like a great way for us to really start the grassroots process of thinking and critical thinking. It's a really great way to generate questions, see if there's answers, see if there's robust literature. I mean, now it's becoming easier to even do small, soft scoping reviews or soft systematic reviews so that we can understand, is there enough evidence here in this question that we can now make it a bigger systematic review for entities like the evidence analysis library. So what's great is that, historically with the analysis library, a lot of the DPGs kind of used to co-sponsor these systematic reviews to be conducted. Well, what a great way for some of these DPGs to really start refining what do they want to, support in terms of developing a systematic review around. They can ask some of these questions to start generating that thought leadership rather than throwing out kind of a broad umbrella of, oh, we want to do a systematic review on diabetes and nutrition, like not to be overly hyperbolic, but it's like, it's a very broad question and there's so many things we can generate from that. But it gets harder to get more precise. And so I think it's a great way to help us with some of that precision as we go into the future. So it's not doom and gloom yet. It's really about how can we partner with this and make our questions and our guideline development much more precise, and then also making sure the evidence is there before we even start the effort.
Mm-hmm. So, are there any other guardrails or best practices that we should keep in mind to ensure we're responsible with AI, and we're being ethical in all of its uses?
Absolutely. So, we have a lot of regulations that already are intended for protection for clinicians, researchers, et cetera. Obviously, like the HIPAA guidelines, it's really important that, as we previously mentioned, that you are working with your institutions as they may already have policies or expectations. There are even some institutions that have sole source contracts with Geminis of the world or the open AIs, and actually they've developed ways to produce some guardrails around whether or not protected information is kind of crossing certain paths that are not intentional. And so we do want to make sure that you're accessing those internal stakeholders, being transparent about your disclosures, how you're actually communicating the use of AI in the work that you're doing, and then really understanding what are the guiding principles that are out there to help you as a professional and a practitioner. There's been a couple of symposium presentations that we've done around the ethical use of AI, and we've alluded to the FAIR principles, which is really focused on findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. That's the FAIR acronym. And that's how we really want to make sure that you're using AI in a way that is transparent and reproducible at the end of the day. So there is methodological rigor and there are guidelines around that. But it's really important that you as practitioners, but also your leadership is really using those principles and using your policies to guide your decision making. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of gray, but it's really up to us to kind of determine, when do we start asking the questions of, is this the right use case, or is this how we should be utilizing AI applications?
Well, we know that AI in healthcare and just in our world in general is rapidly evolving. And I don't think we can say rapidly enough. It's moving so quickly. So where can dietitians go to learn more about effectively using AI and incorporating it into their clinical practice?
Absolutely. So, putting in a little bit of a plug for ourselves, I am the co-chair of the Joint Task Force for AI and Nutrition for the Academy as well as for ASN. We're really trying to we recently produced a document with resources around kind of where to go. What are some courses that you can take to really understand some of the basics? There are a lot of institutions, academic institutions, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, many of these organizations that have actually developed different layers of competency and different layers of proficiency for some of their micro certifications or just webinars that you can join to really understand and guide you through the process of, learning from very basic AI all the way to even programming and modeling to that effect. So really knowing what institutions to go to and trust, but also recognizing that we in the Academy also have our own resources. Our code of ethics is very important. We talk about kind of the guardrails. It still really guides us in the direction of proper decision making. And when you don't know, you speak up and then you ask those questions to make sure that you're doing things appropriately. I think in the future, we're probably going to need to develop, here I'm thinking kind of big umbrella, like maybe we need a position paper or practice paper around this, just simply because technology continues to evolve so rapidly. And I think our consumers, our patients, they're all being exposed to so much disinformation, misinformation, especially through technology. And so there may be needs for us to really develop a stronger guidance around how to effectively and ethically maneuver through this. So that's just me kind of putting a bug out there. Maybe somebody wants to start a position paper. But yes, there's a lot of resources. But I will say, as I previously mentioned, the FAIR principles, the World Health Organization, obviously, as prestigious as they are, they have really great principles developed around that. And so really some of these leading organizations are already actively taking a stance and developing some core guidelines.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much insight on the use of AI. I think you've given us a lot of practical tips that we can incorporate into our daily practice. And it sounds like there's a lot of exciting stuff ahead or the opportunity to do more. So thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Absolutely. Anytime, Christina. Thank you.
And listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's content. Be sure you visit our website at dnsdpg.org. We've got resources, education, upcoming events, all kinds of things related to nutrition support. And we're here to help you stay current with your practice and your evidence. So please visit our website. Until next time, I'm Christina Rollins. Thanks for listening.